Hey, welcome back to ZK MasterTech. I'm Zeth. If this is your first time tuning in, we're going to be repairing combines today. So we're going to start on an S790 combine that we got in the shop. This is an internal machine, so it's a trade-in machine that we haven't gotten sold yet. So we're going through and we're fixing everything up. I did an inspection on it and I got a whole list of repairs this thing needs, so we could sell it to somebody and then they can hit the field and have no problems. Let's check out this list. Okay, we got the whiteboard out again, which is not a good sign. So we did an inspection, and these numbers, have to deal with the segment on the work order. So 2, we got a feeder house drive chain. We got a shoe auger that we got to replace because the bevel gear is actually loose on the front of the auger shaft. Feeder house conveyor chain. We got to do the mid-floor wear strips. Separator grate spacers, so it didn't have the separator grate spacers installed, but we already got that fixed. We replaced a Z-bar on the concave that was cracked. We already leveled the concave. We're going to do an unload chain, unload belts, feed accelerator belt. We got a clean grain chain, the paddle chain, clean grain lower sprocket, the tailings. Some of the cotter pins were missing in the paddle chain. Rethresher chain, the rethresher idlers, that's all one job. The lower vac fan belt. Grain tank canvas, it's got a hole in one of the clear windows, so we're going to put a new canvas on there. And the loading auger divider, the driver, loading auger driver, the clean grain top sprocket, loading auger gear case. We've got a weld across auger cover because it's got a weld that's cracked, vertical auger, and the inner and middle and outer unload. There's 3 unload augers. You guys seen me do that before. This machine ran a lot of down corn and it has a lot of dirt that is ran through this machine, so it accelerates the wear on all the augers and everything. So adjust all belt and chains, and then we're going to do all the service stuff, which that's already done. Change the reverser oil. We already did the transmission filter there, so still got quite a bit of work left to do. Today I think we're going to we already tackled the Z-bar and the service stuff and the separator grates and the mid-floor wear strips, but then I think we're going to tackle the we're going to go up in the grain tank and we're going to remove the fountain auger in the tube so we can get to the loading auger gear case, and then work on the top sprocket and the top of the elevator. Okay, so here we are in the 780, and can you guys spot the problem that's wrong with this fountain auger? Yeah. So that bearing went out, and when that bearing goes out, that fountain auger wants to ride up, and it just basically beat the living crap out of that bracket there and bent it up. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the fountain auger out and we're going to replace it, but I don't have an auger yet because we're waiting on parts. The tube is savable, but the gear case down inside here is messed up because that auger was allowed to just beat the living crap out of the driver, and it screwed up the bearings on the gear case. So we're going to be yanking that gear case out. We got to take this cover off anyway, but it's got a crack in it over here that we're going to weld. And we're also going to replace the top sprocket in this elevator and drop the chain out and all that good stuff. So that ought to be fun. Yank this auger out. Alright, so we got that auger out. We got the housing down. Had to unbolt this gas strut here because look how bent that is. So we're going to need a new one of those, but in the meantime, So now to get this housing off, we'll have to take this pin out right here, and then we've got a couple 15s on this side here, and then that'll take that little plate off, and then we can unhook the housing because it's just pinned over here on this side. It just goes into that little bracket there. So we'll get that done and get this housing off of here.
Exactly.
There goes the pin. Okay. So now we just got to get those. I need a socket with 215. Get these 215s out. Go pipe off. Naturally come off. Danger!
You okay?
Yeah. Okay. It's dangerous in the grain tank.
Yes, it is.
Alright, now we pulled the cross auger cover off. Had an electrical connector down here that you got to disconnect for the active yield system. He's taken out of the grain tank. Oh no!
Bummer.
Party foul. Anyway, we got a weld on it. It's got a weld that's cracked on it, so we got to weld that up. And you got to do like 2,000 tool pickup. Oh man, it's all good. Way to go, buddy.
Yeah, it's that kind of day.
Yeah, that's what happens in the grain tank. Now that we're done falling down and dropping things, we're going to take the shield off here. That's going to give us access to our belt. So you just pull it off that way. Yeah, like that. See, there's our belt. So that's running the paddle chain. So our top sprocket is inside of there running our paddle chain for our clean grain elevator. So we take that out. Now we got to take this shield off here so we can get access to the front pulley of that gear case, because we're pulling this gear case out because the bearing on the shaft has slop in it. So we're yanking that gear case out now. But I'm gonna have to go down to the bottom and detension this belt so we can get the belt off of this pulley here. Okay, we got the belt off. I'm just gonna rattle this pulley off. Well, that came off easy.
Yeah.
Now your bit's stuck. Alright, we got the pulley off. Now we're gonna yank out these two 18s. Matco's gonna do it.
No.
Oh boy.
She ain't gonna do her.
Is it Milwaukee time?
You got 3/8.
Gen 2 mid torque won't care.
Let their haters begin.
Let the hate begin. But they just witnessed it.
And this is a half inch after 3/8.
Yeah, it's not apples to apples. We got all the bolts out. Wiggle that guy out of the hole. You gotta turn it to the right so the dipstick will clear. And then wiggle it backwards. There you go. Yank that heavy thing out of the hole, Josh. And there she is. There's your loading auger gear case. Ta-da! And the reason why we're replacing it, well, it's hard to do it now, but this bearing's got a lot of play in it. And yes, you can get parts for these and you can rebuild them, but we just normally throw new gear cases in them, especially how hard that thing's been bashed around by that fountain auger. And we know this gear case has been cooked several times in the field because these elevators got plugged full of dirt. This machine ran a lot of down corn, so that's why, you know, we've got to replace the vertical augers, the horizontal augers, you know, fountain auger. It's just had a ton of dirt ran through the machine. You know, yeah, that. She's mint. Okay, now that we got that out, now we can drop the chain out of here. We'll rotate it around at the bottom. We'll take the master link out of the paddle chain, and then we're just going to drop the chain out, because then we're going to take this pulley off here and we're going to replace the top sprocket and bearings that's in the top of the elevator here, because the sprocket's hooked. So we're going to get that replaced and put a new chain in it. Thought I'd just throw the telehandler up there and we'd throw all our bad parts up there. Be a lot easier to get those out of the tank that way. Dad always told me work smarter, not harder. Doing a little prep work right here. Got to re-weld it where the weld's cracked, so we're gonna get that welded up. Got a new gear case here. We got it full of oil, ready to go back in, and we'll tighten that driver once we get it back in the hole. So we just got to take this over to the welder, weld that up, pulling the paddle chain. Watch yourself, Josh.
All good.
We got to pull that chain out so we can do that top sprocket. There she is. Alright, so we got wrestled the new gear case into place, getting the bolts started. We'll get that thing locked down, and then we can start tearing into the top sprocket here. So we got her slammed in there. There's 4 bolts. There's 2 down here, and then there's 2 on the side, 18mm bolts, and that guy holds 4 quarts GL5. Hold the sprocket with your hand. That's good. Click. I heard it click. What was that, like 230 foot-pounds?
Right about, yeah.
You know, give or take. We got our keyway in, slipped our pulley on, slam that guy down. Click. Oh, look at that. So your clean grain belt is running that pulley there, turning your gear case, it's turning your loading auger or fountain auger. And then it's also turning this, which is driving your top sprocket in the elevator, which is turning your paddle chain. So the corn comes up the back side of the elevator, gets thrown into this cavity, and then gets augered into the tank. And then, of course, your cross augers are taking the corn down into your charge housing, into your vertical, through the horizontals, and into the grain cart. So take that 15 loose, and we'll use the air hammer, and we're going to rattle the pulley off the shaft.
Ready?
Yep. Just like that. Now we're going to take the keyway out before we lose it. Take the set screws loose on the lock collar. So we got a bearing and a lock collar on each side here. 5mm Allen. There you go. Slide that guy off, and you got one on the other side. Alright, so here's a helpful tip here. So we drove that shaft in a little bit so then we could get behind here with an indexing bar. But you want to take a new bearing and see if you can slide it over the shaft. We couldn't do that before. I tried it with the new bearing and she wouldn't went, so we used the whiz bang here with a flap wheel and went around, cleaned that up good enough to where a new bearing would slide on, because sometimes the end of these shafts can mushroom just a little bit and it'll keep that bearing from coming off. So we got that cleaned up to where a new bearing will slide on. So now this old one will come off. Just like that. Didn't even have to tickle that one.
No.
Now, we left the back bearing bolted in. So we're going to use the long air hammer bit here. And if you go on the inside and put it on the sprocket, and then you grab one hand on that shaft and just pull that shaft out to where it comes out of that back bearing, and then you're going to tip the shaft this way, slide your sprocket and your keyway and your two spacers off, and then pull this shaft out. Sprocket and just rattle that and pull that shaft. Just constant pressure before you can. There you go. See, you did the sacred no-no. You dropped your sprocket down the elevator. Oh, you did.
I got sprocket. Dropped the spacer.
Oh, the spacer fell.
Spacer.
Okay, let me see that sprocket. So you can see this sprocket's hooked pretty good. Now, you know, this could probably run another year if our paddle chain was still good, but we're putting a new paddle chain in, and yeah, there's the new one. So you don't want to run a new chain on hook sprockets like that. You'll just mess up your new chain, and they're not cheap. So we're gonna go ahead and replace this little Ninja Star here. And I've seen these just wore down to a point where there's hardly anything left. So, but if we're doing a new chain and our sprocket, you know, is wore through about halfway of the tooth, I'm gonna put a new one in if I'm putting a new chain in. Now you gotta go fetch your parts.
And get that other bearing out.
Yeah, we'll just gotta unbolt it. So
yeah, I'll go get that spacer.
Okay, so we went ahead and replaced the flanges in the bearing, and then we loosely tighten it back here just to where you can get that bearing to spin just a little bit. And then we'll take that shaft and we'll slide it in, and then we'll start our spacer, our keyway, slide the sprocket on, another spacer, push it through that back bearing, install this bearing on there, get to where the sprocket is in the middle groove in here. See this little groove right there? So we're going to make sure that our sprocket's right in the center of that. Plus we can kind of eyeball where the set screws on the lock collar used to be and get that close. And then we'll lock everything down, and then we'll be able to get our pulley on and run a new chain in there. We still got to go down there and replace the lower sprocket as well. And we're out of time for today, so we'll hit that in the morning. Okay, so now we're gonna slide the new shaft in this morning. Got a new keyway. Slide that in. Hold on, you gotta put your keyway in you gotta slide that spacer so it's the first one, and then put your keyway on, then slide your sprocket on, and then slide the other spacer on, and then go through the back bearing. That's got to go over here. So you got two spacers. Got to put it on in order. So put that keyway on, slide that in the hole, slide your sprocket on. Josh is dropping stuff already this morning. Got the sprocket started. Get your other spacer on. Then you can shove it through that back bearing. Feel the back side of that bearing, see how far your shaft's sticking out.
Just barely.
Okay.
Stick it up.
Now you can go ahead and put your flange on. Put one flange on, up there. Put your flange on, just slide it on the shaft the other way. There you go, and put your bearing on. Go on, flip your bearing around. So you always want the side the lock collar goes on, you know, with the inside race has a cam. So you always want it pointing out.
There she going. Just had a little rough spot.
Just had to tap it on there. Alright, got that bearing slid on there. So now you feed your bolts through. Okay, so judging by the set screw mark, looks like we need to go in just a little bit, doesn't it? So you made a little gauge.
Uh-huh.
That's thinking with your dipstick.
Yep.
Okay. So is your sprocket centered with that notch inside?
Looks good.
Looks good?
Yeah.
Well, you moved it a little bit. Yeah, that's where it was. Okay, now you can tighten your 15s. And we'll get the back side, and then we're going to throw the lock collars on each side and lock them down, and then we can put everything back together. Alright, so I got my lock collar on. I just took the lock collar, slid it onto the cam of the bearing, and then I turn it opposite of shaft rotation, locked it down, just take the air hammer and just tighten it down, and then I'm going to lock this set screw. And for those of you that don't know, that lock collar is locking the inner race of the bearing to the shaft. So the inner race can't spin on the shaft, and the shaft can't move in and out of the bearing. So that's, you know, locking the shaft and the bearings into position so they can't move. Now that we got the bearings locked down, we can go ahead and put our pulley back on. And before we took it off, we kind of made note to how much of the shaft stuck out of that pulley so we can get it back in the same spot, and it was just about right where the taper is on the end of the shaft. Yeah, right there. Lock that bad boy down. Oh, she's spinning.
Better drop some more tools first.
Josh is still dropping tools. So we're going to eventually, when I get my paddle chain that I still don't have yet, I take a ratchet strap and a hook, and I drop it down the back side of the elevator, and I hook the chain like this, and then I pull the paddle chain up the back side, and then I have the strap coming out of this hole, and then I just yank real hard and yank that chain up over the sprocket, and then I grab that pulley and I start turning, and then I work that chain back down the front side of the elevator all the way down to where we can hook the chain back up. So when we get a new chain, we'll do that. We're still waiting on a loading auger to put in that tube. Still got to order that strut there, and when we get all that stuff, then we'll come back up here and get this all wrapped up. Okay, so it's actually been a minute since I could film this because we've been waiting on a loading auger for our tube, So we got a new gas strut. Josh is putting that new gas strut on because our old one is, you know, just a little bent. Yeah, isn't that lovely? So get the new strut on, and then we're going to put the housing back onto here. We still don't have a clean grain elevator chain, waiting on that. So, but we can go ahead and get the housing back on and get the new auger in the tube, and then we'll just leave these shields off to where we can put that conveyor chain in later. So you slip that pin into there, and then you put those bolts in there on that plate, and then it locks it in. Now you can lock your knee. There we go. Now we can shove an auger down in that tube. Easing on down. There. Now we gotta get the bearing on here. It's like jumping rope in an attic in here, and I ain't kidding you. It's probably close to 100 degrees in this tank right now. We're at sweat level 9. For sure. Is that better?
Okay, lots better. That look gooder to you? Now good.
Okay, she's complete, bolted in there. FYI, these bolts here have a special hardened coating on them. Makes them harder than woodpecker lips, so the grain just doesn't wear the heads off, and then, you know, bolts come out and that goes flying out. That thing there will save your life in a grain tank that's over 100 degrees.
Yes, it will.
It actually makes it a little bit tolerable.
You can breathe.
In here. Yeah, you can finally breathe with that thing, so that thing's worth its weight in gold. So now we're just waiting on more parts for the elevator chain, and we can get our belt back on, and then our shields and cover and everything back on. So we're done up here for now. Alright, now we're yanking this vertical gear case out with my special John Deere tool that I've highly modified to work with these big giant floaters. As you can tell how close you are whenever you're trying to drop one of these things. But took the chain guide off, and then you take all the bolts out around the vertical gear case. I leave 2 in. I hook my jig up, and then we're going to take the 2 bolts out, and then we're going to lower this thing down. We're just going to ease her on down. taste of that. It's good for you, it's high in protein. My biggest green bar, and then that Big Mac bar. It's time to get serious. That auger's kind of sharp. Thing needs to go that way because I'm binding up the top. You're probably gonna have to get up there, pull that auger that way, go to the north. Like that. There you go. Straight up.
What?
Gotta come down north.
Got it.
Look at this, fellers. This is 505 separator hours. Look, there's just nothing left. That's what happens when you run a bunch of dirt through the machine when you're running down corn and you're bringing in all those root balls full of dirt. It just destroys your vertical and your horizontal augers, your loading auger, clean grain auger, all that stuff. So we got a pulling tractor in the shop, 4430. She's a little hopped up, isn't she, Patrick?
Yeah, just enough.
It's just not stock anymore, but it's running in the stock class. Patrick's gonna fire this thing up for it so you guys can hear this thing.
It's kind of loud.
That thing sounds awesome.
It's kind of obnoxious.
Alright, back to the vertical. That's a new vertical. You see how thick the flighting is on there. This is this guy. I mean, there's just nothing left. So now we're gonna get this vertical shoved back in the hole, splined onto the gear case. Well, we're gonna clean that gear case up, and then I'm gonna pump grease into that grease zerk right there until I get grease coming out of that seal, get those splines cleaned up, put some anti-seize on those splines, anti-seize on the top of the vertical, and then we'll put it back in. But before I put that vertical in, I'm gonna rip out all the unload augers, and we're gonna be replacing them, but I'm waiting on one auger. So for now, I'm just going to leave the vertical out, and then I'm gonna pull all these augers out. Then I'll install the vertical. So when I go to time it, all I gotta do is slide the inner horizontal on where it needs to go. All right, well, that's gonna do it for this episode of ZK MasterTech. I appreciate you guys watching, and stick around. We're gonna be doing some more combine madness. There is a lot of content to come on combine, so Make sure you guys stay tuned, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell, and I'll see you on the next one. And keep that green iron moving. See you later.